Hello, it's April 3rd, 2018, and I'm still messing around with segment names, but I'm thinking of calling this one Speaking Spirit. And when I say that, I literally mean Holy Spirit speaking through me to you, and not the you that you consciously identify with. I'm trying to get through that into the real you, the eternal true you that's consciously connected to God, that's still unconscious, and trying to draw that out. During my spiritual experience, I became consciously aware of this inside of everyone. And it was strange when it first happened because I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that I knew what everyone was thinking, but they didn't thinking unconsciously. And when I say that, I mean, if you imagine that we're all here together as one, and our true selves are in our unconscious trying to come out, that's what I experienced and knew existed. And it was very confusing at first because it seemed like, because I was still not recognizing the nature that of the projection, that it seemed like everyone was in on this game of trying to wake me up, and it was like this unspoken truth that about God that no one could say, but they wanted to, but they couldn't. And that's exactly what it is. It's inside of you, and it's trying to get out. It's going to see something like this, and it's going to pique its interest. And if you're feeling interested in this, that's because it's your true self trying to say, hey, there's something there. Go learn about that. And I'm here in this time space like everyone else trying to learn their own lesson, but I'm also here to help facilitate this transition. And that's what I was born in here for. And one thing we're going to have to try to break down is the idea of the ego's logical interpretation of things, because it's actually logical insanity. I have a book here. It's called Entangled Minds by Dean Radin. Basically, it's a book that compiles a lot of evidence on ESP from all different kinds of fields. And, we can't really say how to interpret that, but the point of it is that it's a real phenomenon, and it doesn't really make sense to just completely ignore it. It's something's to it, and that's bringing up these gray areas is relevant to helping describe how the ego exists. If you can imagine, it's this ball that's surrounded by the totality of God. And it thinks it's separate, but it's actually inside of it completely. And that's how it maintains an illusion of separateness, which is completely false and insane. It has to ignore questions like what happened before the Big Bang. Like the way our paradigm exists now, we just bury our heads in the sand about such questions and just ignore it because it seems so impossible to answer. There's just no way to get at it. And that's just not true. There's answers in this realm that includes things like ESP. And you also have questions like, how does consciousness arise from brain matter? In neuroscience, we study the brain and we're looking right at this thing and we're finding all these correlations, but it doesn't explain the most important questions about why we are here. Like, it's like you have all these things that don't make sense within the paradigm at all, and we just have to ignore them to maintain the paradigm. And there's perfectly logical explanations that involve the spiritual, and that's how the ego maintains itself in this world we live in this ball of separateness inside of the totality. And it's going to be up to us and you to try to recognize that that's insane, and we can build a more coherent picture on reality. And one of the avenues to doing this is recognizing how the cycles of your own development through life and then the larger cycles of humanity. In ancient Babylonia, there is a collapse, and I didn't really know anything about that, but I assumed because during our current, we're gonna collapse, but there's a rising feminism, and all these archetypes of the feminine mixed in with, included within that is global warming and fears of rising water, and obviously women's rights of the 20th century, and all this want for equality, which is good, but it's missing the main point, which is that it's signaling the coming full circle and returning to wholeness through rebirth through the mother. And that's a motif that's found it's a part of the hero's journey, which is basically a blueprint for spiritual development within individuals' lives and within humanities. And you find that idea of the rising femininity in the Roman Empire collapse. And you can even find people who say that feminism is what caused the collapse of the Roman Empire. And that's, of course, a misinterpretation of what's actually going on, and that it's just a process that's a part of the rise and fall. And as you go around these circles, like in Babylon, Roman Empire, and now we have the benefit of being able to look back on those events with access to something like the internet. And all of this is meant to make it easier for us to find God. And we don't have to. We can fail and just collapse and go do it again some other time, but you don't have to. You can find it right now. You don't have to depend on the world to find it. But once you do find it, you realize that everything that doesn't integrate the spiritual into its workings, into your life, like it's your same life, but integrated with spirituality. Not doing that, you realize it's completely insane, because it's like you'd have to have your head buried in the sand, knowing like, all right, this happened before, it's happened in my life, it happened in previous collapses, now I see it happening now, like we're headed for collapse. You have all the archetype signs, you have the symbols of transformation, you have the phenomenon of UFOs running the God image, you have feminism, you have these irrationalities in climate change, and then interest in zombies projecting out that we are unconscious, and there's so much more, and there's a lot to uncover. I'm gonna need help with that, because you can read about that in my Medium, and I'll talk about that more going forward. But how can you be going head on into a train at 1,000 miles per hour, clearly knowing that it's the answers are there, in recognizing things like ESP and Eastern traditions, answering questions like why we're here, and the answers are there. It's just in our spirituality and recognizing how how this dream world works. And when you're operating within this ball of the ego's creation, it's all logical inside of it. But it's thinks it's whole. It thinks it can find wholeness through its own doing without recognizing that it's inside of something much greater. And we're going through the dark with our eyes closed, running towards a brick wall. But that sounds really dire, but the brick wall, it's angling up. So it's like you're going up higher. Like maybe if the brick wall of Babylon was down here and they were running into it and they had all these signs of transformation and they're down here. But then they built up after it collapsed, there's the rubble. And then they built up from that, Roman rubble. And now we're up here. And each time, because you're at a higher level, the physical reality makes it easier for you to recognize the signs. And one of these ways to recognize the signs is through looking at the work. Well, I looked at the work of Jung, and you just see how I'm going to be talking about this more, but how we're being driven through cycles largely unconsciously. We think our will is free, but it's actually imprisoned will until you recognize that there's a broader scheme going on. There's a logic behind this. It's the track. We're in the cart on a roller coaster, and the track's already built, and we think we're on this little patch of the roller coaster and that we have it all figured out. In reality, the whole thing's already made. And we're going to get to the end, even if we don't see the whole thing right now. But you can choose to see the whole thing right now. And that's what a spiritual awakening is. And that's what's easier than ever. It's harder right now because it's still outside the paradigm. So when I experienced this, I did the opposite of burying my head in the sand because I saw the hopelessness of the problems and that there's just nothing to do about it. I'm a PhD student in neuroscience, and I could just focus on that, get my degree, and get a job and doing whatever PhD in neuroscience do. And, that would have been a fine life of just doing that and getting a better than average job with my degree. But I just saw all the hopeless despair, and I couldn't ignore it. And not being able to ignore it was part of the fact that the Holy Spirit was using me my life was planned in a way, it was planned, to go inside science and find spirituality through science so that I could come back here and talk to your guys' egos about crazy egos, about how insane they are. You're not insane. You're perfect. You have a divine spark of light that wants to shine through you. Imagine it. If you can imagine it in your head, and you have your ego. You can call that your frontal lobes, and your divine light's trying to come up through you and take and shine out into the world. And that's what I'm trying to talk to. Like, this is gonna sound crazy to your ego. You're just gonna want to say, well, that's irrelevant to me. Like, yeah, ESP is a thing, but we don't understand it. But not understanding it isn't a reason to say it's irrelevant to this. And not understanding why the universe came into being doesn't mean that it's irrelevant to all of this. And now it's just getting so blatantly obvious, and it's just going to get so obvious, and it's going to, because I'm here, and this Holy Spirit's going to be talking through me this whole time, and I'm going to keep learning more and piecing together these cycles about how the collapses are similar. And you're gonna, if you just listen, I can't tell you exactly what to do. I can't make you listen, but I can just show you the door, and there's lots of good sources online that I'm gonna collaborate with and all of this. And you the act of you talking about it and learning about it, and you have your friends, and you talk to them about this stuff, your parents, you can talk to them about what they know about spirituality and what their thoughts on it, and maybe they're not interested in it, and then you can go online, and that's another one of the advantages of this time period, is that you don't need anyone in your direct immediate environment to find common interests in. Like, your whole family and all your friends could be against it and think it's crazy, and you could still find something online and to talk to, and people who will listen to. And yeah, the voice grows louder the more you listen to it, and not just listen to it, the more you bring it out into your reality and let it live through you. Because the big joke at the end of this is that we got separated from, I'm not going to speculate too much on the origins of the universe, but fundamentally there is a separation, a perceived separation from God, because we thought we could conquer the universe on our own and we would know better. And in the end, we come back and we're like, God's waiting there with open arms. And he's like, not I told you so, but he's like, I knew you'd come back. I knew you'd find that God's will was the best choice all along. It's kind of like you want to make the best choice, but how are you going to make a better choice than God? And God, the one who created all of this, knows what's best for you. And why would you want to do anything else? And it's not like it's a will not imprisoned by fear. It's not like you're not creating. We can still create, but we create in line with God's will, and it's pretty great to know that God's at your back. Literally, like, if you want to talk about what is that? The secret stuff, like, that's real, but you have to, if you're not in line with God's will, you're gonna get, because your mind's gonna be split and conflicted, you're gonna get split and conflicted results. And you gotta think about this from a big picture, okay? You are a divine being who has reincarnated in this time space, and it's not random that the population has gone from 1 billion at the beginning of the 20th century to 7 billion. I'm not sure exactly, but I know it's going up towards 7 billion, and that's not random at all. And it's not random that human productivity has been sped up, and we have technology, and everything happens faster. It's because we're nearing something. It's quickening. It's actually called, people call it the celestial speed up or the quickening, and that's because everything's inherently spiritual. And I talked about that. I'll talk about that more going forward, because it's all about us finding God and returning to our divine state. That quickening in physical reality is actually a speed up in the process of you being able to make the conscious connection between the reality and your divine state. And when you make that connection, it's the whole universe, just everything makes sense. Like, if you're living in a state of confusion between in politics, and it seems so chaotic between the left and the right, and people are arguing these viewpoints that are obviously wrong, and you're trying to make sense of it, and like you're trying to say, how are we ever going to come to some kind of agreement with when everyone's just trying to defend their biases and irrational viewpoints, and like how can they ever come to agreement? And you get so caught up in it, and the reality is that they can't, and that's what you're supposed to get, is you're supposed to get that it's impossible for anything ever to get solved when everyone's living in a fear-based state, away from their spiritual essence. Because when you're the difference when you're woken up, you realize that everything is a projection, and your reality is just a projection. Especially what our fears and biases we project out, and as long as we think they're out there, we're never going to come it's impossible to come in any kind of agreement with anyone, because if they're both projecting out what's actually inside of them, they're seeing what they're fearful of in the other side, and not recognizing it's just, and when everyone's doing that, it's not possible to ever do anything besides, at best, displace problems to something else. Like, you take care of cigarette smoking, and then it just gets displaced to e-cigs, or take care of one drug, it's just going to go to someplace else, or it's just going to be rebranded as pharmaceuticals. And you have like kids with ADHD, and it's like they're not fit, they're trying to express them true selves because they're being born in this time space to wake up, and it's like, no, they're troublemakers. Let's just dose them with amphetamines and have them focus on this ego-based time space like everyone else, so then they just fit in with the whole blindfolding and pacifying of everything. And that's what we do in that's what they do in psychology with just giving people drugs. It's like, well, we can't tell them we can't tell them to find God, and that they're actually trying to connect with their spiritual being, like, because we can't talk about God, because like we can't, and that's just insane, because that's what they actually need. They're actually would find peace in giving their self over to their divine state, and letting God act through them. But everything's so insane and so backwards that we can't prescribe that. So until we get, like, our job, if you decide to wake up and believe that I am actually here talking on behalf of God, like I am, so then what do you do? Well, I'm going to point you towards good resources online to develop aligning with God's will. Like, I did it, but that's not my forte necessarily. I'm here to speak with conviction about God, because it takes people standing up for it and knowing for a fact it's real, and being able to speak in scientific terms. I can answer questions, but that's not going to be my focus. My focus is trying to make as explicit as possible how this spirituality is the only thing that matters. Like, and you don't need to be this out about it, but you could, and you would probably cut time off your suffering, and because ultimately you can't, what you teach is what you believe. What you believe is what you teach. And the more you teach something, the more you're going to believe it, and the more you believe it, the easier it becomes, and the easier it becomes, you're just aligning with God's will more. So, yeah, so logical insanity. You're going to hear arguments, but the whole premise is wrong. So, it's built on this scientific paradigm is all logically fits together. Everything's going to fit together. But the whole premise it's built on is wrong. So in that way, it's completely insane because the whole this whole premise it's on is false. And if it's like that way's the right way and that way's the wrong way, like you can go this way in a logical path, but it's entirely the wrong way. And that's kind of where we're at. And one way I think about this is trying to flip the script on it, because it's still right. Like, the physical sciences still describe occurrences in reality, but they only do so in a very restricted way that ignores the bigger picture. And if your paradigm has to ignore these critically important and relevant questions just to sustain itself, when it doesn't have to, when there are answers, like spirituality, that's really crazy. And just getting that point across it's the easiest and the hardest thing to do at the same time, because it's so obvious that it doesn't make sense, but then your ego is going to want to say, it's going to try to deflect it. So you might be experiencing something like, and I'll get better at this as I encounter it more, and your comments, your critical remarks are going to be very helpful for me, because when you're at absolute truth, when you're aligned with God's will, all criticisms and everything just makes you grow stronger, because it's all going to backfire on itself. Because your true self wants this, and if you're projecting out reasons to doubt it, all that means is that you want it more. And that's how it actually is. Like, I don't want to I'll pick on Sam Harris. Just like, Sam Harris is also a neuroscientist, but he has this whole thing about like using a scientific rationalism to do away with God. And when I see him, I'm like, that guy wants God so freaking bad, like, it's not even funny. Like, he has the biggest God fetish of anyone, but the way he contorts it is that he doesn't need God, but really he needs it so bad, because that's what it always means, because everything is an absence of love or love. Every pain and every is just a call for love, and God responds with love. And what he does is it epitomizes the logical insanity, because he is extremely intelligent. Like, there's no denying that. He he is way more articulate than me. Like I can bear. I never was good at writing, and I'm getting better. But in speaking, I was, as my own nature of having the introvert into my own mind was associated with being incredibly shy. And I'm not gonna be as good with words. I'll get better, but and that's gonna be another reason your ego's gonna try to deflect. Like that guy isn't even that good at talking. How is he? He doesn't know. The Holy Spirit isn't talking through him, but it's kind of part of it because it's such the information is so abstract, and my whole life I was just looking past things to see the underlying meaning. That's just in my nature, and I turned out to be for this reason. And just the big picture. I'm a big picture guy. Seeing everything and not being able to ignore salient stuff like this, like. But back to, so Sam Harris, it's funny because I feel like the polar opposite of him in that neuroscientist, but God is the answer. It's obvious, and he's the opposite. So that'd be interesting to talk to him. If someone knows Sam Harris, I would appreciate getting in contact. A debate with him would be that'd be good. I'm better at talking when I have someone to talk off of, and just this free talking, this little. Well, that's what I tell. That's what my ego tells myself about of my abilities. But what did I say? Okay, logical insanity. Don't ignore. You exist inside something, but that doesn't mean you're separate from it. It's all around us, and the Holy Spirit is within you. It's a light, and you're just trying to let it out. And if this seems interesting, that's good. That's a good sign. If this piques your interest and you feel like you want to learn more, that's a good sign. And so, I'm not going to make definitive statements about the metaphysics of your soul, but if it's not something that you're just instantly rejecting, go with it. Like, it's going to be easier for some people because of we're all the same. We're all our return to God is insured for all of us. But with that said, some people are going to be closer, and that is probably related to. I want to be careful about saying things like this because the way we generally see things is in comparison and judgment, and the correct attitude is to just speak the truth and help people where they're at, and where people are at is going to be different, and people are going to respond differently to this. And if they're just flat out reject it, they may come along at some point in the future, but that's going to be easier for them. The more people accept it, the easier it is to then break through. It's, if everyone's doing it, if everyone's like, praise Jesus, it's going to be easier. It's harder right now because it is less common, but I would say if it's any incentive that if you do get in line with it sooner, that probably is signify past lives. I mean, we can make leaps in the evolution of our consciousness, but that probably does mean something. you can leapfrog probably, but you know, if I'm gonna try to play the cool kids are doing it card to help get past your ego, and yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind. Like I'm just open about this, and I'm imagining you with a little um, ball in front of those muzzles with the ball around your true self, and I'm trying to get around that and poke through it, and I hope I'm doing it. I mean, that's why I'm here. I don't know. I guess that's okay. Well, I'll keep trying and keep trying to get past your fear egos. This is not remember. This is all a dream. You will wake up from it someday, and internalizing the fact that this is a dream is synonymous with enlightenment. If you can just think about your dreams at night and how you wake up from them and try to think about that as this, then it's just a tool to help break through your egos. And what's I gonna say? I'll call that good for now. Peace.